Hello, it's great to have you with us at this hour. I'm Daniel Che, coming to you live from the Customs Immigration and Quarantine Office in Paju.
And I'm Shin Se-min. Behind our set, you can see the Torasan checkpoint, and it's quiet and there's no trucks moving in or out of this joint, the industrial complex for now, as the sign in Korean shows. There is renewed hopes to turn things around.
And it's constantly glowing right behind us. And we learned earlier this morning that the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un had left the capital Pyongyang to the border village of Panmunjom. This as the leaders of the two Koreas have a summit scheduled for 9:30 a.m. South Korea time.
And we also know that the South Korean President Moon Jae-in is just moments away from leaving his presidential office of Cheongwon in capital Seoul. And the distance from the South Korean presidential office to the border village of Panmunjom is just some 52 kilometers. So we are expecting his trip to take about an hour or so. But first, let's start things off by connecting to the main press center in Goyang, where our Kim Min-ji is live for us. Min-ji?
Hey guys, we're here at our studio in the main press center at Kintex. We'll be broadcasting live the historic meeting between South Korean President Moon Jae-in and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. And joining us also in the studio are two experts. To my left, this is Dr. Andrei Lankov, professor of Kookmin University. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
And to my right, Dr. Kim Chang-soo, Senior Research Fellow at Korea Institute for Defense Analysis.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Now, it's the first inter-Korean summit in 11 years, and the significance behind this is that it's the first time for the summit to be held on the South Korean side. Kim Jong-un will become the first North Korean leader to step onto South Korean soil. Now, President Moon is expected to be leaving the Blue House at around 8 a.m., so shortly, and the two sides are expected to meet at the demarcation line between 9 and 9:30. Now, North Korea's the KCNA reported that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un left early this morning, and he will be making his way to Panmunjom as well. So what do you expect to come out of this meeting? So it's very historic. It's the first in 11 years. How do you think things will play out?
You know, expectations running very high here in Korea and also in the United States or elsewhere, because this is a very momentous, historical moments for South Korea and North Korea, because we have been kind of fighting each other over the last 10 years over the nuclear issues, and also we are talking about kind of non-proliferation or denuclearization of North Korean nuclear weapons, and also peace regime in the Korean Peninsula. So expectations are running pretty high, and we really hope this would be a very successful first summit meeting over a 10 years period. And this will lead to a very successful summit meeting between Mr. Trump and Mr. Kim again in early June, or even earlier than that. So expectations are running high, and we're having a just very legitimate and reasonable expectation, because if you have a very high expectation, you might be pretty much disappointed. So we are just relatively have very reasonable expectations, but there's a lot of reservation also demands that you should be very careful to get the very firm commitment by Kim Jong-un about the denuclearization. Anything else is just a second matter. The most top priority should be denuclearization of the United North Korea, and how we're going to guarantee its regime survival. So I think it's pretty good. We are at a very historic moment this morning, and thank you for this kind of good opportunity for me and the professor.
So what tourists have said, what's more significant is that it's going to provide a foundation to build the trust between the two leaders that's been lost over years of provocations and sanctions. One key aspect that's different from the past is that we're going to put denuclearization on the table for discussion. What do you think is going to come out of it?
Well, I'm pretty sure that there will be some kind of formal commitment to denuclearization made by Kim Jong-un this time. I'm pretty sure that Chairman Kim will say today something about his willingness to surrender nuclear weapons eventually, if the situation is suitable, if conditions are right. Maybe, not necessarily, there will be some more specific comments like, security guarantee or something. So it's basically a necessary step to start any negotiations. North Korea should express its commitment to denuclearization. However, unlike many, maybe most people now in Seoul, I would not overestimate the significance of such commitment. After all, we tend to forget that according to the Article 4 of the 1968 Non-Proliferation Treaty, every single nuclear state, including United States of America, Russian Federation and Chinese People's Republic, are technically committed to the eventual surrender of their nuclear weapons. As you see, it has zero actual significance and zero impact on their actual international behavior and military strategy. So I would not attach, frankly, too much significance to this verbal commitment to denuclearization, which is going probably to be basically kind of expressed today. Nonetheless, it's still good as the first step, because without such, no matter how formal, a commitment, the further development will be impossible.
That's right. So we don't know for sure like what's going to come out of it. In order not to repeat mistakes of the past, like we've had some great joint statements released in the past from the two summits and also other agreements. In order not to repeat mistakes or in order to fully implement what's achieved today, what kind of measures should South Korea be taking?
I think that should guarantee a kind of final, the eventual removal of all nuclear weapons in North Korea. It should be a trust building, because there is no trust, political and military trust between North and South Korea. So the first step, this is a very important meeting for today, because this was the first stepping stone toward the eventual final denuclearization of North Korean nuclear weapons and also other WMDs, biochemical weapons as well. So it will take many years, but the key is we got the firm resolve and commitment by the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un this time, and we're going to process, we're going to negotiate how we're going to reach that particular goal for maybe, I don't know, for several years. But again, today is just a very symbolic day for getting his commitment, his voice, that we are determined to terminate all these nuclear weapons and also other WMDs. If we get that kind of commitment, it is be a tremendous success. And the next meeting in Washington or some other place with President Trump is a kind of very final set of putting a, because so this is a very kind of one set of two summit meetings, beginning with the North and South Korea inter-Korean summit meeting, and also U.S. DPRK meeting. So this is a one set, and then we're going to have some other in the summit meeting as well, before and after that. This is a whole set of nuclear summit meetings between the two Koreas and all the surrounding countries to guarantee a finally putting an end to the long-lasting kind of armistice situation here in the peninsula, like 65 years. So we are pretty much expecting, but we have just reasonable expectation. As the professor said, it will be almost impossible that we are going to get the final 100% guarantee by Kim Jong-un. They are still negotiating with Washington on how, under what conditions, under what process roadmap, how they're going to achieve that kind of status. We are not that dumb. We are very realistic. And it's just, I think this is just a new start. That's why the peace, a good start, a new start. That's the motto of this inter-Korean summit meeting today.
A lot of people have expressed concern about how serious North Korea is regarding its commitment to denuclearization. Given North Korea's past behavior, we do have doubts whether this is true or not.
Sure.
North Korea made a surprise announcement last week saying it will halt its provocations, missiles, and nuclear tests and shut down its Punggye nuclear test site. What can we make of that announcement?
I would say it's also almost unavoidable first step. Because such a freeze or such a moratorium on nuclear tests and missile launches was a necessary precondition for any serious negotiations. I see basically two such preconditions. First, North Korean government should say it is committed to denuclearization.
Okay, we're going to step away for a second and look at the screen. we're just hearing that South Korean President Moon Jae-in has left the Blue House and is making his way to Panmunjom. Now, from the Blue House, it's expected to take about an hour or so, given traffic conditions, and he will be making his way to Panmunjom, where he will meet with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un at the military demarcation line. The two leaders are expected to meet at around between 9 and 9:30 a.m. Now, we can see that the police cars are making its way. It's very high security. So what's the significance? We're meeting in Panmunjom, the South Korean side. It's the first time for the summit.
Yeah, this is the first time for this new government, the Seoul Moon Jae-in government. But this is maybe...
Can I come over
Okay, sure.
a second? We think that President Moon is going to make a statement before he actually departs for Panmunjom. We'll see if he makes a statement. He's greeting people that have come out to support him and wish them, I guess, a successful inter-Korean talks. It's the first in 11 years. Okay, now he's greeting the Koreans who have come out to see President Lee for Panmunjom. They're waving South Korean flags. A lot of Korean citizens have been concerned about the recent developments as well. Like, we've seen North Korea's behavior in the past, so we don't know what's to come out of it. Like, they can return to provocations, or this could really be the road to peace, as many say. Many say spring is coming on the peninsula. Yeah, we don't think the president is going to give a statement before he leaves. The crowds are cheering President Moon Jae-in. They're wishing him for successful inter-Korean talks. Now, it must be significant for him as well. We've had two conservative governments in the past, and relations with North Korea have deteriorated over the decades, so it must be significant for the leader to have successfully reached this moment. Now, he has got into his car and he is now leaving for Panmunjom. So if we come back to the questions, so what is the significance of this summit being held on South Korean soil?
Because the two previous meetings was held in Pyongyang, like during the Kim Dae-jung government and also Moon Jae-in government. No, I'm sorry, Noon government. You remember Mr. Moon, President Moon was a chief of staff during the Noon government, and he was really, he made it sure we're going to inherit the legacy of these two liberal presidents, Kim Dae-jung and Roh Moo-hyun. And this will be a kind of putting another very important touch to the whole process of the Korean talks and unification process. I think this must be a very emotional, very symbolic moment for the president himself, because he was there like 10 years ago, 11 years ago, and he's been involved in this kind of long process of how we're going to discuss these important issues with the North Koreans for the last 10 or 15 years. So I think he has a very special emotion, special kind of feeling that I'm about to make another important milestone, into Korean talks, of which he really believes put a final kind of end when the time is ripe, maybe a couple of years ago, maybe preferably during his tenure as a president, I don't know. But we are still keeping hoping that something, that's why we are sending our best wishes to the president and to the whole nation that this must be a very important and successful meeting today.
So the leaders of the two Koreas have a number of itineraries together. Apart from the summit talks, they have some significant events such as planting a ceremonial pine tree and taking a walk privately. Do you think there's going to be a little bit of soft talk there, easing of relations?
Quite a lot of soft talk. because of what is the major significance of this summit. It's essentially a preparation for the future summit between President Trump and Chairman Kim. And it's important to create the right environment. So I expect a lot of symbolic gestures, a lot of broad smiles, a lot of small talk.
Sure.
And we should keep in mind that so far there are severe restrictions under which the South Korean diplomacy has to operate. Two major issues which are essentially at the very center of the North Korean problem cannot be really discussed today. First, South Korean government cannot seriously talk about nuclear issue because it is above all issue which has to be handled by the United States. So South Korean government is simply not in position to discuss anything meaningful about denuclearization, or I don't believe in denuclearization, by the way. I don't think it's going to happen, at least next for a century, maybe a couple of centuries. But I would expect to have serious reduction of the nuclear weapons if we are lucky. But such issue cannot be discussed today. And the second restriction is, of course, economic cooperation. Moon Jae-in government, Moon Jae-in administration is very much committed to idea of economic exchanges and cultural exchanges, but above all economic exchanges with North Korea. But it cannot do much because according to the United Nations security resolutions, pretty much all kinds of meaningful, large-scale economic cooperation with North Korea now is seen as a violation of sanctions. So you first have to remove sanctions, and it cannot be decided today. It's obviously not New York, not the United Nations headquarters. So there will be a lot of soft talk and some important statements, not only denuclearization, not only end of hostilities, some other things too.
So we are broadcasting live. South Korean President Moon Jae-in making his way to Panmunjom. Now it's the historic third Inter-Korean Summit, and it will start around 9:30 a.m. at the Truce Village of Panmunjom. Now, North Korean leader will also be making his way. We heard from KCNA that he left early this morning. Now, Kim is expected to make his way to Panmunjom by car and cross the demarcation line between the Military Armistice Commission T2 and T3 buildings. Now, there he will be greeted by President Moon Jae-in, and the two will walk together towards the Peace House where the summit talks will take place. Now, on their way, they'll also inspect the Guard of Honor as part of the welcoming ceremony. Now, KCNA reported that Kim Jong-un will open-heartedly discuss with Moon Jae-in all the issues arising on improving inter-Korean relations and achieving peace, prosperity, and unification on the Korean Peninsula. Now, it's kind of hard to say that it will all be discussed in just one meeting, and it's going to be hard to come up with a significant agreement that the world is awaiting in just one go. So, what are you making of it?
Because as we can expect, because they are actually the meetings face to face is just maybe 2 hours or 3 hours, including the dinner time. So it is almost impossible to discuss all these matters in detail. So this is just highly symbolic, first time ever face to face, that kind of meeting between two leaders, so they can just develop a very friendly relationship with each other. I think that's the most important first step toward the inter-Korean relationship, and also eventual kind of denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula, and also the peace regime on the Korean Peninsula. So this is, again, the very first person meetings face to face, and I really hope they can find a new person, that just trustworthy person in the counterpart, as opposed to kind of very bad feelings, a kind of prior type of style that we used to have for Mr. Kim Jong-un. I think these two leaders are really reasonable, and they got all the information about the background, the information about what had happened for the last almost a quarter century, and what they have to do for the next 5 or 10 years. I think they are very pretty much realistic about the assumptions, about the expectation of this particular meeting today. So I think they are reasonable, and we also have to keep a very reasonable expectation of what may come out of today's meeting during the kind of joint agreement. So as the professor pointed out, it would be impossible to come up with any specific, kind of wording about the agreement, but this is kind of just a general framework and the resolve that where we are heading for. And the final important moment of time will be with Mr. Trump and Mr. Kim, and because this is a very nuclear issue, and also South Korea really help a kind of role as a kind of arbitrator between the two, if it is possible. But anyway, we are just hoping that today, a very kind of less than, I would say, about 10 hours, 7 hours, it would be possible to cover all these things in great detail. But I think they are ready. If there is a need to do that, maybe during their personal talk and stroll, kind of, we call it as a kind of French stroll outside the building, then they might discuss deeply what they have really in their minds, what they're about to do as a leader of the both countries. This is something that might just, surprise us, but we are just keeping a very reasonable expectation of what may come out of this meeting today.
So the president is passing by Gwanghwamun as he makes his way for Panmunjom. Now that we are watching live, South Korean President Moon Jae-in making his way to Panmunjom. Now all eyes will be on this summit, and many are hoping that this is the first summit with North Korea, the start of many more summits with North Korea to come. If we look back to last year, we were on the verge of war. U.S. President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un were talking about their nuclear buttons on their desk, whose is bigger, and we saw several nuclear tests as well as missile launches. Why the sudden change since early this year?
Actually, first of all, first signs of changes could be seen not early this year, but in late November last year. When North Korean government suddenly made a statement saying that they have fully completed the nuclear and missile development, which was a nice face-saving way to introduce moratorium. Talking about the reasons, I would say there are three reasons. First, they worry about the level of tensions. The North Korean decision makers definitely expected that the development of nuclear and missile program will eventually provoke a high level of tensions with the United States. But because we are dealing with a very unconventional president of the United States of America right now, the situation got significantly more serious than they probably expected. So maybe from the very beginning they wanted to start negotiations, but they probably decided to speed things up, not finishing actually their program. Second is a change in position of China. I'm not sure if I have enough time to discuss why it happened, but it will suffice to say that China changed its attitude to North Korea and decided to join a very harsh sanctions regime. Sanctions are not working yet, with few exceptions, but North Korea now is essentially banned from being engaged in any kind of profitable international trade. So sooner or later it will damage North Korean economy, which is, by the way, doing extremely well under Kim Jong-un.
That's right.
And third is the situation in Seoul, because unlike two previous administrations, administration of President Moon Jae-in is deeply committed to interaction with North Korea. For the previous administrations, North Korea was basically an evil dictatorial regime. For the current administration, North Korea is basically, our brothers north of the DMZ. Personally, I don't agree with both opinions, but doesn't matter. It's how they used to see it and how they see it now. And Moon Jae-in administration is probably willing to make much more concessions, to give much more aid, sometimes just straight aid, sometimes aid disguised as economic assistance to North Korea. So combination of unease about level of tension and possible US reaction first. Second, increasing pressure of sanctions, especially because of Chinese new position. And China also indicated that it can change position if North Korea changes policy. And third, the new administration in Seoul, combination of these three factors, pushed North Korea back to the negotiation table. Once again, probably they wanted to do it anyway, but they did it significantly sooner than probably they would do it in a different situation.
So yes, China was like a long-time ally of North Korea, but yes, its change in attitude could have brought it to the negotiating table. Now, Professor Lankov did mention that President Moon Jae-in may be willing to make more concessions and more aid. Now, in exchange for denuclearization, North Korea is expected to make its own demands. What kind of demands do you see North Korea making?
Secure guarantees, secure regime. That's number one priority. Definitely no question about that. But also they want to get some economic concessions, economic aid from North Korea, from South Korea to North Korea, which they definitely, because they are experiencing tremendous economic problem these days due to the economic sanctions by the world community and also the United States and some specific countries like Japan and including even China as well. So they're feeling the pinch of these economic sanctions imposed on us for the last 2 or 3 years. And Mr. Kim, because you said this is a really quick turnaround by Kim Jong-un, I think actually you might interpret differently. This is a long, very carefully premeditated kind of plan after they're reaching the status of a complete nuclear weapon system. And then they say with some boast, some pride, that we are going to really negotiate with the United States. So they intentionally raise the ante with the South Korea and the United States so that they can come to the negotiating table. But this is typical diplomacy because the progress comes at the 11th hour, last moments of a big deal. So I think that's what Mr. Trump and Mr. Kim Jong-un is trying to get, like a big deal, denuclearization on the North Korean part, and also the economic sanctions, the removal of sanctions, and also the normalization relationship with North Korea by the United States. So these are two very important options or negotiating card for both Mr. Trump and Mr. Kim. So I think this is not something that we have been expecting because North Korea is trying to advance its nuclear and missile kind of programs for the last 3 or 4 years. But now they believe that the moment's finally come. The time has come that they really can come to the negotiating table for their own kind of goal, which is to get a kind of concession, kind of acceptance by the international community, and also the normalization relations with the United States. That's the number one priority for North Korea.
Dr. Kim did mention, you said if security is, it's going to demand security of its regime. Now, North Korea has said if the security of its regime is guaranteed, then there's no need to possess nuclear weapons. How do you assess that?
I'm smiling because what do you mean by guarantee of security? You cannot guarantee security from domestic threats, which do exist. The only guarantee which is conceivable and indeed highly desirable is a promise by the United States that they will not attack North Korea. No preliminary strikes, no bloody nose operations, no use of force if North Korea follows certain conditions. It's possible. But is it regime security guarantee? Definitely it's not. And I'm pretty sure that such a guarantee will be given, but it's not enough to persuade North Korea to surrender nuclear weapons. Of course, once again, North Korean government will spend some time talking that they are committed to denuclearization, but once again, American government on paper is committed to denuclearization too, and Russian government, and Chinese and even French government. But I don't expect Paris to give up nuclear weapons for a century or two. So, having said that, so it's simply not possible to guarantee security against domestic challenges. You cannot guarantee any president in a democracy or that he's not going to be re-elected, you know. But therefore, I think that North Koreans will definitely have some nuclear potential. So let's pay lip service to denuclearization, because without such a lip service, it's not going to succeed. But let's concentrate on something which is doable. That is serious reduction of the possible threats which is coming from the North Korean nuclear program. Freezing the program, dismantling the facilities, maybe partial surrender of some nuclear weapons, it's all possible. If incentives are right. Denuclearization, well, we are going to hear a lot of talk about it. It's probably not going to happen. And if some people, especially in the United States, say it's bad, Denuclearization or nothing. I can say denuclearization or war, which will probably create more problems than nuclear North Korea with a rather limited nuclear arsenal.
So some people have said like the halt in missile tests and nuclear tests is probably because North Korea is probably in the final stages of completing its nuclear programs or has already done so. What's your take on this?
Because as the professor just rightly pointed out, speaking something in voice and even writing a written statement about their intent to denuclearize is something about how they're going to implement and how it's going to be guaranteed by the all international community. They have to receive the inspectors from IAEA and also other specific agencies. So it'll take a long time. And so I think for the North Korean leadership, they also need a kind of not just commitment, but also a kind of safeguards measures that can really guarantee its region survival, which including the kind of opening a liaison office in Pyongyang, for example.
Yes,
that's a very first important. And I think the media has reported that the United States, Mr. Mike Pompeo has discussed this matter with the North Korean leadership, that they are willing to open a liaison office, which was actually planned about 20 years ago. And there was a lot of Americans who are actually nominated to serve at that liaison office at that time, 20 years ago. But now 20 years have passed. And I think this kind of question, how we're going to guarantee this this is just a theoretical question, but when it comes to reality, it'll take many years and many more specific measures to really guarantee North Korea. But North Korea should come out and opening up, and it's going to give a kind of freedom to its people because now they achieved the kind of nuclear and missile capability. And also they said they're going to master the ICBM capability, for example, even though we don't recognize that kind of capability. So this kind of gradual step on the part of North Korean leadership and also some other measures by the South Korean government and also U.S. government will guarantee they work together as a kind of guarantor for the region survival. Because if you look at the last 20 years, we are talking about the kind of collapse of the North Korean region, both implosion, explosion, and the starvation of 2.5 million, as many 2.5 million North Koreans, and maybe another sudden change by the North Korean leadership. This really prompted a very kind of anger by the Pyongyang leadership because South Koreans expecting some kind of sudden collapse of the North Korean region because there was the death of their leaders at the time, like Kim Jong-il and Kim Il-sung. So this actually has occasioned great concern in South Korea. So who might succeed him? Because the grandfather and father and the son, maybe because for the last 5 years we are really concerned about the stability or instability of the Kim Jong-un region, for example. Because if you look at the past history, there was a death of the leaders in North Korea, and there was a concern, which is a very legitimate concern. What if North Korea turns very insecure? We should be ready for that kind of instability cases. So we are talking about collapse scenarios, which doesn't mean they really want the North Korea to be collapse. But actually, we are preparing kind of collapse if there is such a kind of case really happens. But this is all for all deterrence purposes. But now we have a new government to solve, and the chances are we believe that North Korea has become very stabilized, and they're heading for just different directions from his father and his grandfather, which is good for us, both of us. So I think this is in that sense, this is a very turnaround for Kim Jong-un from his father and from his grandfather. Now he can just kind of brag and boast about his own capability and his firm grip of the party and the military and the government. So with this kind of personal confidence in his power, I think he can really dictate what he really wants. And I think this will be discussed between the two leaders and also our high-ranking government officials who will accompany him today on both sides today.
So the basic consensus is something significant to be reached in just one meeting is going to be a little bit difficult. But even if they do make some progress in building trust, that would be a significant development for us. North Korea could also request that the summit meetings are held more on a regular basis or set up communication centers. What significance would there be there?
I believe it's long overdue. Once again, I would be skeptical in some regards, because what I have seen last few days is a kind of tidal wave of completely unfounded and sometimes, frankly, just comical enthusiasm about the prospects. Frankly, I'm collecting clippings from the current media, especially of sort of left-leaning media, because I'm going to write a couple of popular articles and then maybe 10 years later an academic article analyzing all this rosy picture which is emerging and which is once again nearly comical. But what is important? To keep our expectations realistic and remember that what is happening is good. It's simply not as good as many people in Korea want to believe. Having said that, liaison offices, it's long overdue. De facto South Korean and North Korean embassies, because officially two Korean states do not recognize one another, it cannot be called embassies, but it will be embassy in everything but name. And I believe it should be done 15 years ago. And it will be important to regulate all kinds of exchanges and to have channel of communication, which is extremely important. And if situation goes bad again, and it might, it will be a good way to reduce the chances of escalations of some conflicts, of some clashes and everything. So you just need to have embassies. Good relations so bad, you need embassy. Bad relations, you need embassy even more. So if it happens, wonderful. And I also hope that maybe there will be a decision to have sort of regular summit meeting, maybe once a year, maybe every second year, I don't know, because it's also important.
So we talked about the establishment of liaison of offices within the two sides. If this happens, do you think more people-to-people exchange or like humanitarian exchanges would occur from here on?
Sure, before kind of opening a kind of liaison office, and which will lead to the final opening of the former embassy in both capitals, which is true. But before getting the kind of final goal, maybe it may come within a year or two, pretty soon, much faster than we expected, as a matter of fact. But before that, we're going to have a person-to-person relationship because there are a lot of South Koreans who have left their families in North Korea, and we have used to have like 10 million so-called dispersed families both in North and South Korea. So let all the generation of South Koreans and North Koreans to have a final family reunion before they pass away. So I think it's personal relationship and also person-to-person and economic kind of exchange and cultural exchange, of course. This should precede this formal opening of these embassies in both capitals. Yes, this is a kind of guarantor that South Koreans really mean what they really mean by giving kind of recognition to the North Korean leadership and also its government, because finally this is long overdue, like 25 years. And we are in the 65 years after the signing of the army's agreements. So this is time to think about not signing a kind of replacement kind of peace treaty. This may take a couple more years to come, but still discuss this kind of thing is something we should be ready for. But again, before that, I think we're on the right path toward this kind of final reunion of two countries. And also, but again, given these kind of very severe conditions with vis-a-vis the WMDs, including missiles and kind of nuclear weapons, this is not just for South Korea, but it's also for China, Japan, and the United States, and including, as a matter of fact, the whole community. How are we going to restrict, very kind of restrain on the potential proliferation of WMDs from North Korea to other countries. So North Korea should do some kind of measures that they can really convince us that we are going to trust you, because given all the, not just words, but the behavior and activities, then now we have come to a much better understanding of your own activity. And that is very much kind of preconditions for a better relation between the two Koreas, and eventually for the final kind of recognition of the United States and North Korea.
Now on the screen we're watching South Korean President Moon Jae-in making his way to Panmunjom. He will soon be crossing the Donggyeoldaegu, or the Unification Bridge, and the two leaders are expected to meet at around 9:30 a.m. Now he's making his way, as we can see. So you mentioned that it could lead to exchanges eventually. In terms of sanctions, most people are saying like we should not ease sanctions. We should maintain maximum pressure on the regime until significant progress is made towards denuclearization. What's your take on this part?
Completely unrealistic demand. Because basically, if the idea is to say we will remove all problems once you surrender all your nuclear weapons, it's not going to happen. Not least because, as I have said many times and will repeat many times, North Korea is highly unlikely to surrender nuclear weapons at all. They will have something, but probably, if they are lucky and skillful, much less than they have now. And right now, most likely they will insist on the incremental change. So they're making some concessions, and they hope that these concessions will be reciprocated with partial relaxation of sanctions. From the North Korean point of view, it will suffice if the sanctions are rolled back to the level of, say, early 2016. Because before that, for roughly 5 years, in spite of the earlier level of sanctions, North Korean economy was doing extremely well. With a GDP growth, say 4, 5, 6%, depending on whom you believe. In some cases, even 7%, but it's the most optimistic estimates. So if sanctions go back to that level, North Korean economy will be probably able to continue its growth, which is to a very large extent driven by something North Korean government is extremely reluctant to admit, that is Chinese-style market-oriented reforms. They are reforming the country, they are doing pretty much what Chinese did in the 1970s, late 70s and especially 1980s, but they are not openly admitting it. And if they have less sanctions, if they can trade, well, the North Korean government companies and the North Korean private business, and there is a great deal of private business in North Korea now, they will be able to make money.
Yeah, it's a Professor made that just one of the reasons why Mr. Kim Jong-un agrees to come to the negotiating table with Moon Jae-in and also Trump is because of the family economy in North Korea. According to the Bank of Korea, for example, the economic growth rate for last year was I understand, like 3.6%.
3.9.
Yeah, something like that.
It's the most conservative estimate.
That's right.
Most pessimistic, 3.9%.
But with given all these kind of the impacts of economic sanctions on North Korea by the international community, and they're spending a lot of money, and because there is no way to get all the kind of foreign currency from the outside world, so they are feeling really pinch of the impacts of this kind of sanctions. So many people are just predicting, some conservative people, even the conservative South Korean people, analysts predict maybe next year or 2 years later, North Korea will face a very serious economic problem. Another kind of, very, as they call the arduous march, even the arduous march during the 1990s and 1980s. So they are about to face a very difficult economic situation. That's why they agreed to, out of many reasons, come to the negotiating table, because this is reasonable kind of calculation by Kim Jong-un, because they are going to maybe even economic collapse within 2 years unless they abandon, at least give the impression that we are about to abandon our nuclear weapon. So that's why he made, I think this is made very clear. And as he pointed out, we were actually kind of predicting that someday he will come to the negotiating table after raising the antes, because now their price, we have to pay a kind of high price for the concession, for example. But this kind of the price is something we can accept, no problem. This for our economy and the U.S. economy, this is just a small thing. But for North Korean economy, it's a big thing. Kind of concession from the South Korea and the United States and international community. So this is a big exchange of these kind of potential concessions from each side by agreeing to come to the negotiating table with Moon Jae-in and Trump, and also some other leaders like Mr. Putin and also Mr. Xi Jinping and Mr. Abe. So this is a very historic moment, but I think on the part of the North Korean leadership, this is a kind of unavoidable decision to come to. Otherwise, they will certainly fail to kind of perform, and they're going to face the serious kind of failure and even the breakdown of the system. So I think this is a very fortunate decision by the Kim Jong-un leadership and his kind of people on his staff. Okay.
Yep. So there was widespread speculation that sanctions did bring out North Korea to the talks, because more sanctions following provocations would mean that its economy would suffer even further. Now, Kim Jong-un has expressed his willingness to achieve economic growth. So do you see the end of this nuclear test and missile test announcement for the North Korean regime to focus more on economic development?
Yes, of course. And honestly, I think that what the North Koreans were doing, the North Korean leaders were doing over the last few years was, I would say, an overkill. Because if they care about security of the regime, well, frankly, I hate to say so, but given the sad experience of the last 20 years, there are some reasons why they would like to go nuclear. Because we have seen many examples how it turned out for countries which did not. But having said that, it's clearly an overkill. Because the ability to strike the United States with an ICBM, which did cost a lot of money, and it was probably not that necessary. So it's on many people expected, even inside North Korea, by the way, many people expected that in, say from 2013, 2014, Kim Jong-un government would be fully committed to the economic development. And they're doing a lot about economic development. As I have said, Kim Jong-un government is quite pro-market. Their ideal is so-called development of dictatorship model. The harsh but very efficient authoritarian governments of, say, South Korea of the 1960s, Taiwan of the 1960s, China under Deng Xiaoping and the like. But they could do much more had they not spent so much money and efforts on the ICBM and nuclear program. So, well, it's probably time when Kim Jong-un decided to stop. Speaking about the major issue, whether it was because of sanctions or not, frankly, I don't know. It's a pure guesswork. I would say that probably, not necessarily, but probably from the very beginning, the North Korean government wanted to reach a certain level of military potential and then to start negotiating from the position of strength. But I strongly suspect that what they have now is not the level they initially wanted for. They wanted more. They wanted to demonstrate their ability to really hit the continental United States. Frankly, they have not done it. They tested two models of missiles, Hwasong 14, Hwasong 15, but you know, Hwasong 15, which is theoretically capable of reaching Florida, has been tested only once. And it was not tested on a regular trajectory. So, well, it's not enough for deploying a new, highly complicated weapon system. It was tested only once, even if the test was successful. So I would expect that under more, I would say, conventional situation, with a more conventional US president, they probably would spend, well, maybe a year or two further developing the missiles, ICBMs, nuclear weapons, and then probably they would still say, anyway, now let's stop. But because situation is getting unstable, because sanctions are beginning to push, so they had to basically stop before they reached the level they probably, it's speculation once again, they initially wanted to get. It's a bit like if you look at history of all conspiracies or revolutions, they seldom start at the day when they were planned. Always something happened, so people had no choice but to start earlier. So, well, maybe they wanted a bit more, but, well, still they have something and they are negotiating from what they have. And they can sacrifice a lot and still have enough nuclear potential and get a lot of economic concessions and further increase economic growth, which makes North Korean government quite popular with the majority of North Korean population, for the time being at least.
So would you like to add something?
North Korea's ICBM capability, as a matter of fact, they fired in a test fire 2015, and I think it was on November 9th last year.
Yes,
and
right.
they claimed we are going to finally achieve, we are really achieving this kind of final, what they call national nuclear capability. But I think the United States has tremendous doubts about that because they failed re-entry skills. They still have a long way to go to master the very difficult technologies, as a matter of fact. One important thing, as a matter of fact, speaking of Mike Pompeo, who has been designated and he's been confirmed as the Secretary of State by U.S. Senate. He said a couple of months ago that North Korea will master that kind of ICBM capability within 3 or 4 months by the early of this year, rather. But some specials, military analysts believe it'll take maybe much longer than that. North Korea has a long way to do that, but given the impacts of sanctions, because it'll be very difficult to get all these kind of very essential elements that should go to the kind of ICBM, the missiles. So that's why I think North Korea was smart, because the pressure is mounting up, and they may be forced to terminate this ICBM capability because they're seeing all kind of military threats from the United States. So they made a final decision, okay, it is very difficult to have this kind of ICBM capability. Let's be satisfied with kind of in a short range and IRBM capability, which might hit any bases in South Korea and in Japan as well, which will give a very good deterrence for North Korean relations from what they call the hostile policy of the United States and South Korea. So I think reaching that kind of status, instead of going to the final stage, which is technically almost impossible for North Korean leadership, I think, so that's why. So we have a kind of a very different interpretation of the stage of North Korean nuclear and ICBM capability. But now, Mr. Pompeo said, given his own encounter 4 times in North Korea with Kim Jong-un, I think he got the final kind of confidence that this Kim Jong-un really means business. And we can see how, by giving together concession, he might really come to the negotiating table and talk about the final and the gradual, process of denuclearization of North Korean nuclear and ICBM capability, and also other ICBM WMD capabilities as well. So this all has to do with the North Korean nuclear and missile capability, technically speaking, and also economic concerns that North Korea might see as a very serious, even more serious kind of oppression from the outside world, including the United States. Also, in kind of domestic reasons that people are beginning to grumble because they know getting all the information coming from the outside world, North Korea is beginning to open up, and there is no way for them to just plug their ears without knowing anything that's happening outside North Korea. So people are just become more knowledgeable about the outside world. So given this kind of domestic reasons, technical reasons, and also kind of economic reasons, Mr. Kim made a very important decision, which is in favor of not only this region, but the whole Korean people and the international community as well. So I think that's why we have a relatively reasonably high expectation, even though we will not come up with any specifics in the agreements today, but anything that kind of broad idea, the framework, that we are heading this way, maybe if possible kind of very rough roadmap to reach that kind of final goal, which we will discuss with the United States.
So many have said that North Korea decided to stop at this point rather than reaching the final point because it could risk a preemptive strike and it could have serious implications developing in Northeast Asia. But not to use it as a weapon, but as a bargaining chip. Many have said that it's becoming a bigger leverage than in the position that North Korea was in the past during 2007 and 2000. So do you think it has a bigger bargaining chip
Yes,
now?
it's basically what me and Professor Kim just said.
That's right.
Because quite likely that North Koreans wanted more, but they have still enough to start negotiations from the position of their relative strengths. And they are going to now basically to try to squeeze more than they would probably get, say, 5 or 10 years ago. Because, well, frankly, their success with the ICBM was not completely unexpected, but it happened much earlier than anybody predicted. I'm not a military specialist. But I did talk to the military specialists in a number of countries for many years about the missile programs, North Korean missile program, and they sort of agreed that North Koreans probably would create an ICBM capable of hitting the United States. But when I asked them when is it going to happen, until a few years ago the answer was, well, maybe 2025, maybe 2030. So it happened, say, 7-10 years earlier than it was expected by the military specialists in United States, in Russia, in China. So I would say that this success is something which is going to become negotiating chip. Irrespectively of whether they wanted more or whether they were planning to stop, as I have said, I think they were going to get more, but then faced a very strong reaction from the United States and changed in Chinese position and decided to cut short their program. But they are in much better positions, the much better position to negotiate now than, say, a few years ago.
I think we tend to talk about the technical advancement by the North Korean leadership in there in like 2015 or 2015, which is true. They made tremendous advancements in technology over the last 1 or 2 years. But we tend to forget how fast we made progress in our part, South Korea, the United States particularly, how we went to counter this kind of ICBM, for example. The United States is much more powerful. They are really negotiating from strength. And they have the capability to counter and intercept all these missiles. And we're talking about kind of, so-called the left of the launch capability. So North Korea actually has been much more knowledgeable about the capability of the United States, how they're going to intercept or even destroy, or even before they launch, they are going to just neutralize all these ICBM capability. So this is another technical reason why North Korea, before it's too late, because otherwise they are really going to be neutralized. All these ICBM capability will be neutralized by the U.S. Drones and highly sophisticated weaponry. This is something North Korea has no knowledge whatsoever. So they are becoming much more at the kind of the capability by the United States, how they're going to effectively abandon and deneutralize, for example, neutralize all these U.S. North Korean weapons. So this is a concern that before we're going to be destroyed by the U.S. Military options, which number like more than a dozen. They are all kind of capable, not just the strategic bombers and armor carriers, and also all kind of capable. So this kind of knowledge that they actually, you said they're negotiating from strength. I think this is a relative, I would just call it a strength, a kind of negotiation from a relative weakness, because they're beginning to feel the kind of weakness vis-a-vis, I'm talking about the US and Korea, not just some other countries. Of course, previous to the Kim Jong-il regime, they were much more inferior, and Mr. Kim Jong-un actually made tremendous kind of advancements in their capability, and also some progress in the academic field. But also, relatively speaking, South Korea and the United States have made much more progress, far better technology capability. So that's why this is a relatively speaking. Speaking of the strength, that's for the United States. So I would call it speaking of relative weakness by the parent leadership.
Strength compared to what they used to be, what they used to have 10 years ago.
That's right.
Of course, in absolute terms, they are weak power. And as you have said, as Professor Kim has said, when they saw the reaction of Donald Trump, when they faced hints and leaks from the White House about possible bloody nose strike.
We're going to cut short for a second. I apologize. We'll get back to the question. South Korean President Moon Jae-in is passing 통일대교, the unification bridge. Now we can see from the screen there, he passes the bridge at 8:54 a.m. Now we can see his vehicle making its way across the unification bridge. Now, for the past hour, for nearly an hour, we've been looking at President Moon leaving the Blue House presidential office in the Blue House and making his way to Panmunjom. Now we've seen him crossing the unification bridge. Now we're going to connect to our team at the Torasang checkpoint to see what the environment is like there.
Well, Moon-jae, thank you for providing us with those insights, sharing the knowledge and, of course, the outside perspective or the third-party perspective from the professors and experts that you are seated down with. It was interesting to hear their take on a lot of mentions about the bargaining chips, the leverage, and the situation we're at right now. And of course, I believe at one point in Time magazine, President Moon Jae-in was featured as the negotiator or the great negotiator. And I think this is a time when that reputation, in terms of delivering on that reputation, he is doing a stellar job.
Exactly, and he also made a surprise TV outing on his way to the border village of Panmunjom. It barely took him an hour for him to get to near the border village of Panmunjom, as it only took 55 minutes for him to get near the Imjinggak Bridge and now to the Unification Bridge that he is passing. That surprise outing, also saying hello to his neighborhoods before making making it onto his summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, and it also shows the way of governing that we mentioned when we were watching the footage.
He is governing the way he campaigned. He's constantly going back to square one, his humble beginnings when he was campaigning for presidency, and he is constantly delivering on those promises and with the people, and he is always trying to tailor his policies for the people. Of course, in the process, we will experience some setbacks or repercussions, side effects. It's inevitable. We can't expect change to be made rapidly without any shells being rattled along the way, but it is a necessity for the greater good in the long run.
Yes, and what we are seeing on the screen is the actual meeting place of the South and North Korean leader for their third official summit. That is the Panmunjom. That's line you are seeing is the military demarcation line, and that is the one that straddles the two Koreas. And on the upper side of the screen is, I'm assuming, the North Korean side, and the southern part of that would be South Korean side. And we will be seeing shortly after North Korean leader Kim Jong-un crossing that demarcation line on foot to
make a symbolic gesture. It is very different from his predecessors. His father had the South Korean leaders invited over to North Korea, and this is the first time a sitting North Korean leader is crossing over to set foot on South Korean soil. So it's a very strong reconciliatory gesture. And as with President Moon Jae-in, Kim Jong-un seems to be delivering on his scheduled flow.
He seems to be on schedule these times. It's more predictable these days.
Much more predictable in the past. I think it started at some point in January. It was a very striking changing point because he was dressed in a very different fashion, and it was delivering a message that seems to center around peace and reconciliation. Of course, we did not know what exactly to make of it until he delivered on the actions with the participation in the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics, which happened quite rapidly. We were expecting maybe some cold feet initially, but it really happened like a domino effect from cultural exchanges, performances, sporting event activities, participation, and of course, unfortunately, Kim Jong-un did not make history in some sense. He is not the first of the Kim dynasty to cross over to South Korea, because that honor goes to his sister, Kim Yo-jong, who is, of course, a strong advocate. And of course, according to officials from South Korea who have met and spent time with her, claims that she's a very strong listener.
And we are seeing footages of that exact location where the two leaders of both Koreas will be shaking hands and greeting each other and welcoming the North Korean leader into South Korea for the first time, as you've mentioned, all the more significance to this summit that we are watching today. And as you've also mentioned, it's a quite striking difference that we are seeing, because that Panmunjom, the location that the two leaders are meeting today, a couple months back, it was a place where we saw a dramatic scene of a North Korean soldier making his life-threatening defection to the south. He was he was running besides those flying
dodging bullets along the way.
Exactly, and he dramatically survived, and he is now well in South Korea. But at that location is the place where the leaders of the two Koreas will be meeting to talk about peace today. Something
something you would only see in movies. I think there was a Korean movie that was well featured and well delivered in terms of the reality of the division in South Korea, and it featured soldiers on the other side of the border, learning that they are not too different, that they are in fact one people, divided not by their choice but due to circumstances. But of course, we are ultimately both Koreans.
And probably because of the atmosphere today, what we are seeing on screen, the Panmunjom, the building, and at the Panmunjom, that is a building of the North Korean side that we're watching, and it's so peaceful and calm. What we're seeing, it's very serene. And we've seen clips of some of the guard of honor by South Korean military prepared to greet the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un once he makes his way to the south. And it's just a striking difference from what we've seen months back. And that was just November last year. So within just 5 months, we are seeing this much of a development on the Korean peninsula.
Right. To most of us who have been following these developments consistently, or even those who have been tuning in when there are headline makers or highlights regarding inter-Korean relations improvement, we think it feels like it happened overnight. But actually, to those involved in making sure this becomes a reality, a lot of work, a lot of time has been put in. For instance, the president actually consulted many people in various levels of society.
I think we are seeing video footages of President Moon Jae-in making his way to the border village of Panmunjom, where he will be greeting his North Korean counterpart, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, in moments' time. It is now 9:01 a.m. South Korea time, and their scheduled meeting is at 9:30 a.m. So in less than half an hour, we will be seeing those two leaders hold their meet and greet.
Right. Hopefully there are no confusions about how they've had in fine print North Korea time and South Korean Standard Time.
3 years ago, when they wanted to make it special and have Pyongyang time, which is 30 minutes back.
Right. I'm sure they have
late.
some logical reasons or political agendas that's driven them to make sure they had to resort to such changes. But of course, once talks are held, there will be some significant changes, I believe. This one is certainly different from the previous summits in 2007 and 2000 for a number of reasons. What's most interesting is that this is a point in time when North Korea really feels like they don't have much to lose with their advancement in nuclear capabilities, especially weapons and missiles. They feel they could call the shots and threaten the rest of the world, but it seems like they have taken a different turn. Hopefully this is something that we can give credit to the young leadership who experienced studying and living abroad a big portion of his life, seeing things outside of the Hermit Kingdom.
And leading up to today's summit, we've been reporting on the past couple of days that South Korean officials and officials from North Korea also were holding rehearsals, dress rehearsals, to make today's summit effortlessly perfect.
Right.
And we are seeing those red carpets being put out at the Panmunjom, which is something that does not happen all the time. I bet that this is the first time ever that they've rolled out the red carpet at the border village.
Literally.
To welcome the young leader Kim Jong-un making his way.
That is just a fragment of what's being done to make sure he is felt welcome and to send a clear message that we want to work towards peace. We want to listen to North Korea and give them a voice instead of keeping them shrouded in mystery and us reading between the lines or reading the tea leaves to determine what they're trying to tell the rest of the world. It will be good for North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and his top aides to come out and deliver their peace of mind directly to us and for us to share it with the rest of the world instead of having filters in between, which would have a lot of noise in between. The messages could be mixed and fumbled. And as you mentioned, Semin, the carpet is just a little bit of the major upgrades that's been made to the Peace House. I believe you can fill us in on the details of all the intricate upgrades we've been putting in to make sure we impress and wow our North Korean visitors. Not just that, but also to send a message that we hunger, we yearn for peace and reconciliation. This
is the moment to talk about peace, especially when North Korea prides themselves that they have mastered their capability in making their nuclear capabilities to its finesse ability. So it's perfect in their scale. So today's summit is going to be very crucial in that the two leaders are talking about the issue of denuclearization and peace on the Korean Peninsula. And on the corner of the screen that we're seeing is part of the Guard of Honor that we will be seeing, which will begin with the welcoming ceremony. There it is. Both the Army, Navy, and the
Marine Corps, and of course, and every branch of the military would be there, and they're very tall. If you've seen them in person, during my military days, I used to pass by their barracks, and they'll be rehearsing their routine, and it's quite a sight.
And their welcoming ceremony and the Guard of Honor will be taking place at 9:40-ish South Korea time. So upon 10 minutes, the leaders meet and greet, the welcoming ceremony is set to take place, and the two leaders will symbolically walk through that guard of honor together, just like they did with previous former leaders of South and North Korea in Pyongyang. That was in the first two inter-Korean summits that we'd seen in the years 2000 and 2007, and we're seeing that borderline again. Something very symbolic we're seeing
Something
today.
very symbolic, and somewhere that not many Koreans can visit. It is a very difficult place to visit. It's open to foreigners, but not to Korean nationals, unless you're covering a special story or you've gotten
highly
prior
guarded.
permission. It's highly
not,
guarded.
It's not open for civilians.
It's a very bizarre feeling that inside a room you can actually step on both sides, depending on which direction you set your foot forward or backward. As for the welcoming ceremony and the first contact the two leaders will make, we will be keeping a close eye on their hands when they're shaking hands and holding hands together. Because if you look back to 2007 and 2000, it seemed a little awkward. They seem to have a bit of a distance, although the hands were clamped together. And I think that's a very strong signal as to how devoted they are, how hungry they are to just sit down and really talk their hearts out.
And this time it's going to be broadcast live. So that moment, their handshake, their facial expressions, their gestures, they're all going to be beamed live around the world. So the world will be watching the leaders of the two Koreas making their first move, their first face-to-face. They had a brief phone call ahead of today's summit because they wanted to fine-tune some of the details making up to today. But it's their first encounter ever. So it will be historic, mind you, and it's going to be a very interesting for a lot of the viewers here in Korea and around the world, seeing those two leaders live on TV.
Right, the two dignitaries are leaving it all out there because the technology in terms of definition of what the camera can capture is very different from a decade ago. So,
and we're also seeing a South Korean President Moon Jae-in's convoy that presuming that also includes the delegation, the 7-member delegation that he is with, including Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa, Unification Minister, Defense Minister. He's got 7 representatives of his government to join him on the summit talks with the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, who will also be accompanied by his member team, which is 9-member team.
Right, his A team, which also includes his sister. And we're also wondering if how the arrangements will be for the first ladies of both sides, how they will be seated, how they will be dining, how they will be contributing with their soft diplomacy.
Right, we still have not yet heard by either governments that on the arrangements with the first ladies that you mentioned. We don't know whether they're going to be there today, but it is still an option. They've opened that option for table. So if they choose to have, there it is, South Korean President Moon Jae-in arriving
with the rest of the team, including Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa, who stands out with her gray hair, and of course the Joint Chiefs of Staff members as well. And
I believe he is making his way to the Peace House, where the two leaders will be having a summit today in a couple of minutes' time. And I think that chair and the desk we're seeing on the side of the screen is also where the North Korean leader will be making his signature moment, a big moment for North Korean leader as he makes his way
to sign the logbook. And of course, we will see a gate that's been united to make sure they walk in together instead of separately. The paintings you will see at the backdrop are 2 mountains. One will be Bukhansan, which is interestingly directly translated, it's North Korean mountain, but it's the most commonly hiked mountain in South Korea. So it's interesting that we have that name, and it's put there to remind North Korea that we share these names and we share these facilities or natural amenities. So we should just have no more borders between us and grow closer together. The other painting would be of the Kumgangsang mountain. Of course, we had that tragic turnaround where we had an amazing tourist program where South Koreans were yearning to queue in line and get there, but it's been suspended. Hopefully that will be lifted soon.
And we just have reports that President Moon Jae-in had entered the Peace House, where the two leaders of the Koreas will be holding 2 rounds of summit throughout the day, and that is the Panmunjom, the joint village, the joint village of Panmunjom is straddling the borders of the two Koreas, and that is exactly the first moment where we will see the two leaders shaking hands, and that's the red carpet they may be walking into. That's the building that they will be holding their summits, and
we'll be seeing that building quite often for the rest of the day.
Exactly, and through that line of red carpet, the two leaders will be crossing into the Peace House. And I believe we have our Kim Min-ji still on standby at the main press center for our updates.
Right, we'll toss it over to you, Min-ji, at the main press center.
Okay, thank you, Simon and Daniel. We're back here at the main press center in Kintex, Goyang. And we just heard that President Moon Jae-in has arrived in Panmunjom. Now, we saw him greet some of the officials that will be sitting at the summit table. Those include Presidential Chief of Staff Im Jong-seok, National Security Advisor Chung Eui-yong, National Intelligence Service Chief Seo Hun, and the Ministers of Unification, National Defense, and Foreign Affairs. Now, also added to the list was Chairman of South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff Chung Kyung-do. So that's total of 7 all in all. Now, the two leaders are expected to meet in about 20 minutes' time. The first historic face-to-face meeting between the two leaders in 11 years will take kickoff at 9:30 a.m. And according to South Korea's Summit Preparatory Committee, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un will cross the inter-Korean border on foot. Now, Kim Jong-un is probably North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is probably also making his way here. We don't know what mode of transport he is using, but we are speculating that he is coming by car, and he is expected to come through the Pyongyang-Kaesong Expressway. Now, it's about 170 kilometers from Pyongyang to Panmunjom, and it's expected to be about a 2-hour and 10-minute ride. Now, what we're seeing on screen is Panmunjom, where the two leaders of the two Koreas will be meeting. Now, it's the first for a North Korean leader to step onto Korean soil, but not the first of the Kim's family, because his sister has already been here. But delegation from South Korean side has also met with the North Korean leader, but it's actually the first face-to-face between President Moon Jae-in himself and the leader. What kind of things should we look out for, like a handshake or their facial expressions?
Yeah, of course. Handshaking and even the hugging. I think hugging is also possible because there's a gesture of friendship and a kind of new era, beginning of a new era. The handshake isn't enough. It's maybe hugging, a very personal touch, very emotional. And this is really what the two leaders have been looking for. This carries a tremendous political symbol for both Korea and South Koreans. So I think handshaking is not just enough. They are going to have a very good hugging, and I don't think kissing is possible because this is not culture though.
Yes.
But hugging, good hugging, means a lot for South Korean and North Korean people. Skinship, sure, skinship, and speaking Korean, the same language, mother tongue, rather than relying on translator. This is one of the way to express himself and themselves pretty honestly, because we are speaking the same language, mother tongue. So I think we're about to see a very surprising picture, opticals of these two leaders happening in 10 minutes, 15 minutes.
So you see more skinship happening as well? Some more skinship between the two leaders?
Yes, of course. Because essentially what we are going to see is largely a symbolic and preparational event. It's hopefully will be the first link in the long chain of events, but right now, as we have discussed, not many practical decisions can be made. It's largely a place for symbolism, for gestures, for broad smiles, from some kind of declarations. Real decisions are going to be made later.
Now, on their way, they'll receive a guard of honor as part of the official opening ceremony. The guard of honor from the three branches of South Korea's military. Now, so we can also see this is very symbolic.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Because honor guard in all the Korean traditional costume. They're going to play the Arirang, according to the reports, which is a symbol of the Korean people. This is a sad song though, but I think this is a kind of reminiscence of all the tragedies we've been through for the last 70 years. So this is highly symbolic. I think this is give a very good impression and to all the people both in North and South Korea. We're finally meeting again, and maybe the times will come not that far away because we have been waiting for the 65 years or 70 years so up to today, but we are expecting that this kind of I think I see the euphoria in the air because people are just excited to see these two encounter by the two leaders, but also a kind of potential easing of relations between the two Koreas and leading to the final, I wouldn't say it's a unification will come, not in a short time, but kind of harmony and kind of living in peace and, so this is what used to be called the peaceful coexistence between two Koreas. That's the kind of the point in which we're heading to the final unification of two Koreas. So I think we are pretty much ready, and this is a very happy day for all Koreans. And also, not just for the two leaders, but also all the people, all the watchers and viewers outside the world, out there. So we are about to see the tremendous moments in our lives, for example, as a matter of fact, in 10 minutes. And they just trespassed there's a T2 and T3, and it's by the NNSC and also UNCMAN, United Nations Command and Military Missiles Commission, UNCMAN. And they're about to cross that line, demarcation line, MDM, military demarcation line, that has been there for the last 65 years by now. This is a very historic moment for our entire people, the nation.
Now we're hearing that South Korean President Moon Jae-in has examined the summit meeting area. Now that is where the talks will be held. It's a peace house in Panmunjom on the South Korean side of the border. Now the two leaders are expected to meet at 9:30 a.m. so in about 10 minutes or so, and South Korean President Moon Jae-in will greet North Korean leader Kim Jong-un at the military demarcation line. Now, it's highly symbolic, of course, like you said. The two sides are known to going to have lunch separately today. Do you see? I saw reports that the South Korean side did offer or did want to eat with North Korean. But do you think at this stage North Korea would want to closely coordinate what was discussed during the first half of the summit?
Honestly, I'm slightly disappointed by this decision, especially because South Korean media has discussed the menu of the coming lunch for a couple of days. Having said that, well, maybe it's the only explanation I can think of, that they decided to eat separately, to dine separately, because they wanted to make some decisions and to adjust their behavior and have a bit of kind of on spot, I would say, analysis of what is going right and what is not going right, and sort of fine-tune their actions on the second half of the meeting. I think it's probably not a good news, but frankly and personally, I don't like to eat lunch with anybody but very trusted people, maybe my family, maybe my assistants and colleagues. So I sort of understand, but I think, yes, it's a bit of a disappointment.
I think having lunch separate is also a good idea because they need the time to adjust to new environment because they were never been to this part of the Panmunjom. And I think this is for practical reasons. They have to really come down to the detailed plans and what kind of topics they should be on the agenda, even though they agree on the broad agenda. But when it comes to specific, they maybe need some extra hour or two to really come down to details. So it's not a bad idea to have a kind of lunch separately from each other.
Yeah, maybe yes, but no, business-like it's good sometimes. When you have negotiations, lunch or coffee is a good place to discuss what's going on and what's going on well and what is not going well. Nonetheless, well, probably in terms of symbolism, a joint lunch would be better. But anyway, it's happened.
So do you think easygoing topics will be discussed during the first half of the summit?
I'm not sure. Because talking about topics, we are going to see some statements about denuclearization, maybe a statement about the end of the state of war as a first step towards a peace system, and a lot of remarks about humanitarian exchanges, divided families, and everything like that. So I don't know what they will start from. Maybe logically it's better to have kind of symbolism and, you know, broad smiles first and then then final statements, which are probably have been drafted a few days ago already. They are going to be made in the second half of the summit. I would expect so.
Some are saying that because through the high-level talks and the working-level talks, the agenda has basically been set, and some are speculating that what they're going to discuss is already on the table. So what's your take on this?
I think the agenda has been set between the two teams, of course, but it's up to finally to the two leaders who are going to make specific remarks or speak, positions. So it's their duty, it's their freedom to do whatever they want as the leader of the two nations, rather than just relying and just keeping the records of what has been done already between his people, his cabinet members. I think this is the two leaders' kind of duty and responsibility to negotiate with the specifics with each other face to face.
Now, depending on what kind of agreement the two leaders reach during the summit talks, they are going to decide how they're going to announce it.
Yes.
What format do you see in the works?
Oh, well, I don't know. Honestly, I would not speculate because I'm not very good with protocol issues, and the current event is, well, to a very large extent, unprecedented. So I'm not so sure. I will not be even surprised if there will be some improvisation, some decisions made in minutes, if not seconds, on spot. Some of which can work well, some probably not. We will see.
So it is 9:22 a.m., so we're almost at the historic moment where the two leaders of South Korea and North Korea meet at the demarcation line. Now, once he arrives, he'll receive a guard of honor as part of the official welcoming ceremony, and he will also sign the guest book before the official summit kicks off at 10:30 a.m. Now, what we're seeing on screen is Panmunjom, where the talks will be held. It will be held at the Peace House on the South Korean side of the border. Now, anticipation must be high there. Within the next 10 minutes or so, they're going to have their first face-to-face encounter. So, how do you think the two leaders would be feeling right now?
Nervous.
Yes.
But of course, they're ready to do that because they haven't gone through all kind of difficult times as leaders of the countries. But I think if you look at the screen, they are passing from the North Korean side. It's a unification pavilion. But on the other side, on our side, on the compound, the name is very interesting. It's Freedom House, the Peace House, which is quite contrasting with the North Korean side, Unification Pavilion. So I think this shows that this is one small segment of how we have been different from each other for the last 70 years. They're only talking about the unification, but actually they don't want the unification.
So if we look at the screen now, South Korean President Moon Jae-in is making his way. So we think North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has arrived. He will greet the North Korean leader at the military demarcation line. We can see him walking with his officials. We saw the foreign minister, Kang Kyung-hwa, making their way to the red carpet, where the two leaders will likely meet shortly. Now he's all smiles.
Yes. No, there will be a great deal of smiles.
Yes, of course. Very carefully coordinated facial expressions.
Yeah.
So we're approaching the historic moment. He's making way to the military demarcation line. So like you said, there must be mixed feelings, nervousness, also high anticipation.
You know, because President Moon Jae-in's family, his father was born and lived in Hamgyong-do.
That's right.
So he's originally from North Korea. So this is a very emotional, very kind of mixed feeling for the president himself, because even though he was born in southern part of the peninsula, his family was originally from North Korea. So this meeting that kind of the people, same people, particularly from North Korea, they are very different from the people in the South. So this is a very mixed feeling, but of course nervous, but I think it's a mixed feeling. And Mr. President Moon Jae-in has been in all kinds of high meetings and serious summit meetings all over the world. So he's really ready to meet his counterpart at this point. Which is really symbolized the dignity and all the prerogatives of the leader of two countries.
So we can see on the screen, he's making his way. Once North Korean leader Kim Jong-un arrives, they will cross the military demarcation line together and between the Military Armistice Commission T2 and T3 buildings. So they will be walking together towards the Peace House where the summit talks will be taking place. And on their way, they'll receive a guard of honor as part of the welcoming ceremony. So we can see the blue buildings there. So we haven't been able to see North Korean leader Kim Jong-un on the screen yet.
No, we don't see it.
Yes.
We don't see it on the...
So viewers will also be anticipating the face-to-face encounter between the two leaders. We can see press there. Now we're reportedly meeting at 9:30, so we're just about 3 minutes away. So he probably is nearby, we just can't see him on screen yet. See some North Korean officials there. Oh, guards on the North Korean side. So within the next 5 minutes or so, the two leaders will be meeting. We can see the guard of honor waiting. Oh, there he is, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. He is coming out of the building, making his way to the demarcation line where he will meet with South Korean President Moon Jae-in. So he arrives at Panmunjom. He's walking down the stairs. And within the next few minutes, he will be meeting President Moon Jae-in face to face. You can see he's surrounded by his guards. There we see some key officials from the North Korean side. Now, he will be accompanied by Kim Young-chul, who coordinated with the intelligence chiefs of South Korea and the U.S. in the preparatory meetings. You can see him. He's approaching South Korean leader Kim Jong-un, or South Korean President Moon Jae-in, rather. The two Koreas have a historic handshake, and they're exchanging soft talk. We don't know what they're saying exactly, but Kim Jong-un is speaking to Moon Jae-in. They're still holding hands and greeting each other. It's a historic moment for the two Koreas. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has stepped over the military demarcation line. The two leaders have greeted each other and are taking a photograph. Now, it's a very historic moment. It's the first time for a North Korean leader to hold summit talks on the South Korean side of the border. Another handshake there for a photograph. Oh, holding hands as they walk. Another handshake. Oh, they're coming back. So the two leaders will have a welcoming ceremony before they start official talks at 10:30 a.m. So a lot of little conversations there, but of course we don't know what's being mentioned. Flowers for North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Oh, and there's his sister Kim Yo-jong, who was also in South Korea. Another ceremonial photograph. So it's the moment that the world has been waiting for. The two Koreas meet. Now we will be passing it over to Semin and Daniel at the Torasan checkpoint, who will be giving us a more detailed coverage. Semin and Daniel?
Yes, Minji, we are watching North Korean leader Kim Jong-un as well as South Korean leader Moon Jae-in walking the red carpet with the guard of honor on both of the sides, welcoming the North Korean leader to the south. And now we saw the two leaders holding handshakes, and they even had a photo shot together. So a significant two-shot that we've never seen before.
Right, very envious of the fact that Minji got to be the one to break the historic moment to the rest of the world. But we appreciate it. Must have been under pressure. Kept on edges probably with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un not showing any signs of being there. Made a little surprise, dramatic entrance there with his entourage.
And the two leaders are now going to walk through the guard of honor, as we are seeing. This is something that we've seen before when we had U.S. President Donald Trump visit South Korea on a state visit that time. But this time, because this event, this welcoming event is taking place at Panmunjom, a sizable, it's not sizable enough to be holding an official and the original size of the Guard of Honor. So at this time, they're going to downscale this welcoming ceremony instead. About some 100 people included in this ceremony today, and they are walking to the Peace House.
Right, in the traditional wardrobes to reflect perhaps a simpler time when the two Koreas were not that much different. That to remind North Korea that this is how it should have been, this is how it could be in the future, and we both have so much more to gain by going together, which is, of course, a very commonly repeated military slogan with the South Korea U.S. forces as well. The honor guards here are not the militaristic boys in green that we expected, but rather in the traditional Korean wardrobes. And yeah, they seem to be having a very nerve-wracking time at the same time, probably going through their heads what they should cover next, how they should approach the next subject, what kind of small talk they should make, and they have so much planned up for the rest of the day. It's definitely a very stressful and pressure cooker moment for them. The weight of the world is on both these leaders' shoulders, and the eye of the world is squarely targeted at them, watching their every move. I understand there were initial reports of possibly having cameras installed on the walls of the demarcation line, but perhaps that was not carried out as planned.
But Daniel, this is a moment, this, as you said, may be a pressure cooking moment for both leaders and the watchers around the world, but this is a moment that the world was waiting. They were counting off days, waiting for today's summit to take place ever since the two leaders have agreed to hold talks the first time in 11 years. And we are seeing the North Korean leader in his Mao-collared outfit, something very traditional in North Korea, but we've seen the North Korean leader in a more casual suit in the recent months and weeks. So
and of course, the symbolic gesture he made during the New Year's address. And of course, North Korea is a communist state.
Right.
And of course, this is the remnants and sort of kudos to the country that has been providing them a lot of support over the years, their big brother country, China.
And with that outfit, we can assume that he wanted to express and show more about his regime, even though he is meeting with the South Korean leader, Moon Jae-in. He wanted to, you know, be the presence of the regime himself as he walked through that demarcation line with his own left foot, was it? I missed it, but...
This is definitely a big coming out party for the North Korean leader. All eyes will be on him, and it is a rare instance because whenever we hear about instances where Kim Jong-un is going to be in the public spotlight. It's carefully filtered and orchestrated to make sure the best side of him is shown. Nothing less than perfect can be allowed for the rest of the world to watch. But now, here he is, out in the open.
Exactly right. That is why today and this moment is very crucial. We don't see him live that often on TV. This is live broadcast being beamed around the world. And as you said, North Korea do have their state-owned television that broadcast also on the every move of the leader Kim Jong-un. But they are pre-taped, so they edit stuff out. They coordinate stuff before they air the taped version of their leader being showed to the people. But today we are seeing live, unfiltered version of the North Korean leader side by side with South Korean Moon Jae-in walking through and now receiving the honor of guards.
A grand gesture of welcome that's reserved for the highest of dignitaries. This is something that we have not seen in Panmunjom in the past. Certainly not in this design, not in this scale.
Not this
Completely
setting at all.
Covered with red carpet all over the place. It's really quite exhilarating, and we are going to be at a loss for words, groping for words to describe this emotion that we're feeling as Koreans. It is a little different to the rest of the world who have been watching and asking us, which side are you from, north or south, whenever we meet foreigners outside of our nation. And it was, at the same time, a little bit baffling, but a little sad at the same time. That was the reality of our country.
And as you said, because the North Korean leader, it is his first time that South Korea is greeting the North Korean leader to South Korean soil. It's the first time that we're having North Korean leader receiving the guard of South Korean military. So that's also significant in its own way.
Right, and it's also very important to note that we're not imposing any distinctly South Korean color that may perhaps be quite imposing to the North Korean regime leader that is visiting, which was somewhat of a case during one of the previous summits when there were...
Let me cut to you short.
Right.
We are seeing North Korean leader Kim Jong-un making handshakes with 7 delegation members that will be accompanying President Moon Jae-in during the summit.
Of course.
Exactly. And now he is to meet with a significant moment also. Defense ministers Song Young-mo, they're shaking hands together. Months before, they were up in arms together and having swords at each other, but now they're
not
shaking
a lot of
hands.
nice words to say back then, but now a rapid change. Again, missiles in November. We're talking about dinner menus in April, so a drastic change. And as for the aides who are accompanying both leaders for South Korean President Moon Jae-in, a number of them have been involved with President Moon Jae-in during the preparations for the previous summits.
Right.
So they've probably had in-depth discussions about how they should make this work compared to how somewhat of we came up short in some angles during the previous
And
summits.
switching turns, we are
Right.
seeing South Korean President Moon Jae-in shaking hands and greeting the visiting North Korean delegation who's accompanying the leader Kim Jong-un. That's
Right, that's
his own sister,
Kim
blood
Yo-jong.
sister Kim Yo-jong, and Lee Sun-kwon, who also visited South Korea for the 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Olympics just
Right.
a couple months ago.
Both of them were instrumental in sending a very clear and strong message that Kim Jong-un is willing to try another option other than the tried and tested and tired playbook from the Kim dynasty, which was to just stay in seclusion, turn their back to the rest of the world and paint themselves to a corner, but at the same time boast that you cannot mess with us because we have nuclear weapons. So perhaps this 21st century, this year 2018, is a time that North Korea also write a new chapter in its history.
I'm
along with
holding
the
my
South.
breath. I mean, this scene that we're seeing, a group of officials from both Koreas
Simply
talking
mingling.
Exactly, in a
Casually.
group, all gathered together to talk about, both welcoming the visiting delegation and also
Right.
welcoming, each other and saying hi because it's their first ever encounter.
Only thing missing is a
face to
high
face.
five and a hug.
We will get there soon.
Usually you are used to seeing officials armed with weapons. Now we're seeing journalists
It's a
carrying
casual
cameras
outing.
pointed
It's
at
very
them.
Casual
It is
outing.
such a dramatic turn of events.
And it looks like they are going to have a group photo before they walk into the building of the Peace House, which is located on the South Korean side of the inter-Korean border village of Panmunjom. And once that photo shooting is over, we are expecting the two leaders to enter the building where the two will be holding a morning session of the summit in moments time.
Right, this historic moment is now immortalized will be immortalized in print once they develop the photos. I'm sure they will have more than just a digital copy of it. And interestingly enough, when they're having lunch, I believe they're not dining together.
They are not, and I considered it as a strategic scheduling by the both Koreas because they wanted to take a pause from each other and regain and reorganize their thoughts and some of the things that had been discussed during the morning sessions before they meet again for afternoon session. But in the evening, they do dine together.
Right,
so
as we mentioned, they're doing multiple tasks together, making their presence be felt and posing for the cameras for the rest of the world, exchanging pleasantries and also planning what kind of strategic dialogue they should have in this very brisk summit. Previous summits have been 2 days. This one is just a single day.
Exactly, and they are walking together side by side, representing the two Koreas. And they are entering the building of the Peace House where the two leaders will be holding their summit. And that building, as you've mentioned before, has been renovated for today's summit.
Right, to make sure they walk in together through one gate.
Exactly, and they've built, and if they've changed the furniture inside the building, they've
I believe
reorganized
everything,
the entire
maybe even the
design.
kitchen sink, have
Perhaps.
been
I'm
turned
not
inside
so
out
sure
and
about
upside
that.
down
But
to
the
make
two
sure
leaders
things are
entering
changed.
the Peace House, and we will soon see the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un signing the guest book. That's the desk that he will be signing. Every time we have a leader visiting from outside of the country, we have their signatures on book. They have that moment of the signing, guest signing.
Right, he will fill in the log with his own John Hancock there.
Interesting to see what he will be writing as the first North Korean
Right,
president or
and
the
President
North
Moon
Korean
Jae-in
leader.
giving him privacy, looking elsewhere.
And it'll be also the first, writing that the South Korea will be seeing firsthand by the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. So every moment, every step of the way to this summit is going to be a historic moment. It's something that we will be looking back over and over
Every second
again.
that we are soaking in right now, it's history in the making. Once Kim Jong-un stepped over, that's where we have been determined that every little development here is something of a first or a maiden move on both sides.
And he's done signing the guest book, and the two will have another photo together, this time just the two of them, in front of the new painting that they've put up during the renovation session for the Peace House building.
Carefully put into consideration the relationship of the two Koreas and a reminder of the fact that we are one.
And we're not seeing a clear vision of the two leaders at the moment because, as we've mentioned, this is unfiltered. This is going live and beamed around the world. So this may be not perfect in the works, but
it'll be hard to get past the devoted journalists who are trying to get the best angles or the most interesting angles.
Exactly. At the same time, though, this is an unfiltered moment that we want to see up front. We don't want to see some edited versions of the two leaders' encounter. We are
raw,
still
fresh. We're getting it directly. They're exchanging pleasantries and discussing the meaning of the painting. And moving on to the next venue. Everything seemed to be moving quite smoothly without any hiccups or
perhaps
any
because the two sides had been holding dress rehearsals without the leaders, so that today's summit goes without a hiccup.
Several full dress rehearsals have been held.
We just heard a presidential secretary officials saying that there will not be any more of the live footages coming out for now. So that's all so that'll be all the stories that we'll be having. But now it is up in the hands of the leaders of both Koreas. So we'll wait and see what comes out of this meeting in the morning session.
Right, we knew it was too good to be true. The live coverages, the live feed could not be going on forever. These two leaders, they do need some privacy and a little bit of a breather to really sit down away from the camera and the public eye to just exchange pleasantries like a brother to brother, a leader to leader. So it will be interesting to find out what exactly went on and the little discussions or exchanges or just a casual talk they've had before they sit down for the actual summit. They have a lot more planned in their itinerary, and we will be bringing you the details in our later newscast, of course, as it develops. Are we going straight to Minji again, or are we wrapping it up right now?
It looks like we may have to go back to our Kim Min-ji, who has been giving us some of the latest details on that. But if she is not available, we could wrap things up at the moment and come back to
Right, we will turn to some experts' opinions on the developments.
And how they saw the first encounters of the South and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. And it's been announced before that the summit would be televised live, but only parts. So they were going to, and throughout the day, will be shooting live footages of the both leaders from time to time. But in between, we will be delivering some of the latest developments happening, and that we
I think so far what we've had, it helped peel layers of all the skeptics and all the criticisms and doubts have been moved. A layer of doubt has been moved so far, and expectation is building for more great things to come.
So I think we have our Kim Min-ji live at the main press center, who's been also watching this very carefully with some of the experts beside her. Min-ji, how did you see this, and what did the experts see about their first encounter, the leaders of both South and North Korea?
Well, it was sure a mind-boggling 15 minutes. It was a first encounter between the two leaders of South Korea and North Korea meeting for the first time, and it's a third summit between the two Koreas, and the first in 11 years. Now, there was a lot of handshakes, a lot of photos. What did you make of the encounter of the two leaders?
This is something we can expect because the first time they see each other face to face, a handshake, good handshakes, and then around the handshakes. But I was a little bit surprised because I was expecting a little bit more kind of, hugging.
Skinship.
But this is something they can do during the dinner or something. So as a first sign, good handshakes and photo ops and the naming in the visitor's book, for example. And this is a good start. And they look very much kind of relaxed, happy. And honor guard, they playing the traditional Korean song of Arirang, which is highly symbolic of our nation and also our national identity and unification. So this is a really good start, and I think I really hope that the things will go as smoothly as we expect it to be.
Professor Langkov, what did you make of the meet and greet? You were expecting more skinship, maybe a hug between the two leaders?
Frankly, I would agree with Professor Kim. Honestly, I expected a hug. But two handshakes, well, maybe it counts for one hug. Let's consider it. Let's see what's going to happen. Well, and looks like that, well, first meeting, everything is going according to the plans. Everybody is smiling. People are probably a bit tense, but you don't see it. And it's indeed quite important because stakes for both are very high.
So now the two leaders are now in the Peace House, and official summit talks will kick off at 10:30, so in about 40 minutes from now. What are some of the things that we should be looking out for today? It's a long day. What should we have our focus on?
I really don't know because all the information about this protocol and the time, every each point of time was actually known by the public because we have a very good knowledge and they have a very good communication schemes. And this has been done by the Chongwade, for example, like we have a secretary for public communications rather. And they've been very much detailed in briefing about what's really going on point by point. And so I think people are pretty much knowledgeable about what's really happening maybe 2 minutes from now. So I think this is really good because people are really getting all the information necessary for this very historic moment. We are really ubiquitous with all the information available to us. South Korea is a very highly sophisticated, technology society, information society, and all this information is not just with a broadcast live, but also they get all the information through their SNS or internet. So they have all kind of additional means of getting information about this particular event today.
So what is the significance of this being broadcast live? Like, North Korean leader hasn't been friendly of being in front of the camera a lot, but from the historic meetings from back to Pyeongchang Winter Olympics when the North Korean delegation came to Korea, we've become more open. We've heard his voice on camera as well. What are you making of this?
Talking about Kim Jong-un, Chairman Kim Jong-un, he was known to be sort of reclusive, but it does not mean that he necessarily feels uncomfortable in front of people, because there have been foreigners and obviously Koreans with whom he has interacted, and everybody who has encountered him says that he is quite relaxed, charming, really good in conversation, so it's not very surprising. And the fact that, well, it's broadcast, it's of course a part of symbolism, to show the human face of North Korea, or what is supposed to be a human face of North Korea. So in this case, it's a face of Kim Jong-un, and it's just another way of further emphasize that now we are getting into a new era, everything will be fine.
So there are three agendas for this summit: denuclearization, setting peace on the peninsula, and bettering inter-Korean ties. What do you think will be brought onto the table in the first half of the summit?
Definitely, number one priority is denuclearization North Korean WMDs. I think I don't know how long it'll take for the two leaders to agree on a basic framework of this meeting, but it's the number one priority, and they know which should come first. Denuclearization, because this will be a very important condition for a successful meeting with Mr. Trump later on. So they're going to spend a lot of time on how they're going to define and bring in special conditions to the kind of long process of denuclearization rather than on one spot, because it will be impossible. This is just symbolic agreement that North Korea will take the lead, take the path to the eventual denuclearization of the North Korean WMDs, but also this more on our side is economic exchange and also cultural events, and also because we're going to have another Liberation Day coming in August, for example. So they are maybe working on how going to hold the second summit meeting, or quite possibly in Pyongyang, so they may be talking about kind of potential future for these two leaders, beginning with the denuclearization, economic exchange, and also cultural exchange. And another very important thing for the Korean people is getting the family reunion with among the dispersed families. So this will definitely top their agenda. But I think they're going to allocate much of the time on the first topic on their agenda, which is denuclearization, even though Mr. Kim will not like them much, because when it comes to detail, it is almost impossible to come into any specific terms and conditions. But the very basic rough idea that we are really willing to, and I have the firm, Mr. Kim, firm reserve to finally give up and abandon these kind of WMDs in return for some concessions from the South Korea and also the United States and the international community as a whole.
So we have touched upon this topic in our earlier discussions, but we don't know to what extent that they will come to an agreement on denuclearization. At this point in time, what sort of agreement, to what level do you think is feasible?
As I have said, a serious discussion on denuclearization is simply impossible, because this is not so much an issue of South Korea, but rather the issue of the United States. And the South Korean government simply has no authority to negotiate many of the relevant issues. So I would expect some kind of oral commitment, maybe written commitment to denuclearization at most. That is, the North Korean representative, that is Chairman Kim, will say that North Korea is committed to the eventual denuclearization if and when the situation is acceptable when necessary guarantees are given. Not much more can be done on this issue. And same about economy. They can basically discuss some basics of the future economic cooperation, but as long as they are facing the UN Security Council sanctions, not much can be done in practice. So major emphasis I would expect on symbolism, on humanitarian activities, including divided families. Maybe we keep sort of overlooking. There are highly likely to be some pronouncement about the end of the state of war, which is the first step towards building a peace system on the Korean Peninsula. It's also likely to happen. And a great deal of stuff about humanitarian and cultural exchanges.
Yep, so we have said if a declaration is made to end war, maybe achieving a peace treaty is too early at this point.
That's right.
But for North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to directly mention that he is willing to take steps towards denuclearization would also be a progress, because so far we've only heard it indirectly through reports or through his aides. How do you see this?
That's right. Speaking of the end of the war is one thing, but actually realizing that is another, because it'll take a whole process doing another measures to do that. So probably there was a lot of kind of speculation and also reservation in South Korea, particularly conservative in the South Koreans, that he should not agree on the statement that this is the end of the war. No, it's just maybe instead, though Cheong-un made it very clear, President Moon Jae-in will talk about the new era of a peace on the peninsula rather than the end of the Korean War, because this was discussed between not just North and South Korea, but the United States and also China. So this is something I understand has been deferred to another meeting between Washington and Pyongyang later on. Rather than so, instead of the end of the war, it sounds great, but kind of new beginning of another peace on the Korean Peninsula. That's quite more probably likely between the two leaders, I guess.
So South Korean President Moon Jae-in has also stressed that obviously in that kind of aspect, there needs to be a common agreement between the key players in the region. So do you see this summit between President Moon Jae-in and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un being the start of many more summits between North Korea to come?
Yes, definitely. Because in order to get any kind of, I wouldn't say reconciliation, I don't want to sound too sweet, stability, maybe not forever, but for a few years to come, you need active involvement of at least China, preferably Russia, perhaps Japan. And I'm not even mentioning three major players, North and South Korea and the United States. So some kind of multilateral talks, or maybe summit meetings, some other meetings are likely to follow this meeting and the next, hopefully next, meeting between Kim and Trump. So, well, it's going to be quite a lot of talks for the next few months.
Yes, so we do have a North Korea-U.S. summit in the works, and there's also speculation that North Korean leader may be meeting with other regional leaders in Northeast Asia. Do you see this, the summit reaching an agreement to hold inter-Korean talks more regularly? You did mention earlier, because it's being held on the South Korean side now, there could be another one by August with Liberation Day on the North Korean side.
We are not 100% sure, but we are just hoping that this historic moment will lead to another summit meeting in Pyongyang. But there might be something that might happen, something in between. So that's why we need to talk at the high level and also working level. So this is, if given we have all these kind of another meetings between the working level and high level officials, then it will kind of secure another kind of summit, possibly in Pyongyang. But otherwise, there might be something intervening in between the two periods. That's why we have to be very careful. So each and every single kind of summit meeting between Trump and Mr. Kim, and also Moon Jae-in is supposed to meet Mr. Putin, I understand, during the Russian, FIFA World Cup. So there is a lot of opportunities for the leaders in this region to talk to each other and discuss about the important issues. After all this Korean War has actually started not just by South Korea and North Korea. Right. It is all kind of proxy war between the former Soviet Union and the United States at the time. So all these four kind of the power should be involved, and they have a stakeholder. They are stakeholders to this important meeting. So it's quite natural for all the leaders to want to be invited and engage in this long process, because there's a full restoration of the state previous to the war 65 years ago. So it'll take many more summits. So I should call this is a summit talk diplomacy rather than just summit talk, because there'll be around the summit talk another one, not to mention the higher level and also working the talks. So it's a very busy months coming ahead.
Yep. So because the North Korean issue is related to most security interest of regional players, so everybody will want to get involved. But people have said that denuclearization itself needs to be dealt with North Korea and the U.S. because it's a matter that they should settle. And many have said that South Korean talks, the inter-Korean talks taking place today, would be a prelude for these talks. What role should South Korea be playing between now and the U.S.-North Korea summit?
First of all, South Korea should push United States towards accepting a compromise, because I'm not still absolutely certain whether the future summit between North Korean and American leader, whether it's going to work well. There is always a probability, a possibility, that at the last moment President Trump will listen to some of his advisors who will tell him that nothing but full, immediate denuclearization is acceptable. And as a result, the summit might not happen or might end a disaster. So it's very important for the South Koreans to keep some pressure on the United States, explaining that yes, negotiations are necessary, and no, military operation is not an option. It's major role. And of course, it probably will be the start of some exchanges with North Korea, just to explain, just to prepare playgrounds for future economic and cultural and humanitarian exchanges.
So you've said that, but in terms of denuclearization, the way North Korea perceives the term and what the U.S. wants is very different. Do you see the two sides making some sort of consensus, reaching an agreement?
I don't think they have agreed any consensus how they're going to proceed with this kind of denuclearization process, because it'll take a long time and you need your confidence and trust on both sides, because unless you have a trust about each other's side, it's very difficult to proceed with this kind of inspection processes. So one of the ideas we are circulating, the South Korean military experts might join the IAT inspection team in North Korea if they are allowed to come to North Korea someday. So we believe there are so many hidden places for these kind of WMDs. It'll take many more years, but kind of quick inspection of this kind. So we are getting a very good idea how we're going to stop all these nuclear facilities, both reported and unreported, in a relatively short period of time. So we have the technology and we have the willingness to do that, but depending on how North Korea will respond to these requests from the outside world. So it'll take a long time, but also we want to keep kind of hopeful that this kind of process can be shortened so that we can develop our good relations with North and South Korea, and also the normal relations between Washington and Pyongyang. This is definitely important, yes.
Okay, so before we wrap things up, what are your hopes for the Inter-Korean Summit that's taking place today? Your hopes for the Inter-Korean Summit?
Well, first of all, symbolism is important, even if I'm somewhat sarcastic sometimes, slightly, but symbolism is important, because without a kind of good environment, we cannot hope that the subsequent events, which are going to matter much more, will succeed. So, well, I hope that North Korean side will basically finally make a public commitment to denuclearization. I understand it's a symbolism. I understand it probably does not matter for much, but it's a necessary lip service to be paid before the beginning of more serious talk. I also hope that there will be some statements about the end of hostilities. Once again, it's largely symbolical, but it's still useful. And otherwise, well, symbolism and, of course, meeting of the divided families, because members of the divided families are largely in their 80s by now, and another 5 or 10 years there will be nobody to meet in both Koreas. So let's hope it will be somehow solved, and maybe some other additional issues.
Yeah, going back to the politics are all about symbolism and impressions, because actually instead of the reality, I don't know whether there's a reality because it's all kind of perspectives and impressions. So this is leave a very good impression that we are finally agreed to meet each other and talking about the non-proliferation of North Korean WMDs. This is highly symbolic, but also it paved the way to eventual implementation, step by step of realizing this kind of denuclearization process. This is just a new start for a long process. Even though both the leaders and also Mr. Trump really wants a quick and all of a sudden type of kind of resolution to this matter. But I think his remarks is highly symbolic because the leaders always make this kind of symbolic gestures rather than the detailed, kind of process, because this is the role of the cabinet ministers and the working level officials. So I think for a short day like this, just less than 10 hours, if we agree to the very kind of broad idea that North Korea will make a kind of final commitment to denuclearization, and this will be a big success for our leaders. So we should keep our expectation not too high, reasonably high, but we should remain very hopeful. Yes.
Okay, so that's where we'll leave our discussions today. Thank you for your insights. So that brings us to the end of this broadcast. For the past 2 hours or so, we have been reporting South Korean President Moon Jae-in making his way to Panmunjom and the historic moment where the leaders of the two Koreas met for the first time at the demarcation line. Now, that's the end of our broadcast, and we'll have a more detailed coverage later on. Thank you for joining us. Bye.
Thank you.